Thank you very much, and welcome again, Cheryl, to the expert mechanism. It's a joint statement, as you say. My name is Mahikant Mohteo, Chief Willie Littlechild, and my chief's name is Usalkiheo, which means Golden Eagle. We appreciate the opportunity to provide input into the EMRIP study on self-determination. We wish to share with you the recent achievement of the federal legislation to implement the UN Declaration, as the Chief Akalea from the Assembly of First Nations referenced this morning or today. On June 21st, 2021, the Parliament of Canada adopted an act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We hope this can be included in your work. This historic piece of legislation has the potential to significantly change the landscape of Indigenous and government relations in Canada based on Indigenous peoples' right of self-determination. As Chief Agalea said, it's a new era. The key purposes of the law are to, 1, affirm the Declaration as a universal international human rights instrument with application in Canadian law, and 2, to provide a framework for the Government of Canada's implementation of the Declaration. An act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples establishes a clear and ongoing legal commitment for the federal government to ensure that its laws, policies, and programs are consistent with the global human rights standards affirmed in the 2007 UN Declaration. The law also requires that a national action plan to implement the Declaration through law, policy, and programs be developed in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples and adopted within 2 years. And let me underscore, Madam Chair, that it be developed in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples. This new act also includes the following highlights in its preamble. The Government of Canada recognizes that all relations with Indigenous peoples must be based on the recognition and implementation of the inherent right to self-determination, including the right of self-government. And if I may take the liberty, while I have the floor, Madam Chair, comment on the speaker from the United States who referenced it as an aspirational document. We're way beyond that statement now. The Government of Canada rejects all forms of colonialism and is committed to advancing relations with Indigenous peoples that are based on good faith and on the principles of justice, democracy, equality, non-discrimination, good governance, and respect for human rights. Implementation of the Declaration must include concrete measures to address injustices, combat prejudice, and eliminate all forms of violence, racism, and discrimination, including systemic racism and discrimination against Indigenous peoples and Indigenous elders, youth, children, women, men, persons with disabilities, and gender diverse persons, and two-spirit persons. Implementation of the Declaration can contribute to supporting sustainable development and responding to the growing concerns relating to climate change and its impact on Indigenous peoples. The protection of Aboriginal and treaty rights, recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982, is an underlying principle and value of the Constitution of Canada, and Canadian courts have stated that such rights are not frozen and are capable of evolution and growth. There is an urgent need to respect and promote the rights of Indigenous peoples affirmed in treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements. And those treaties, agreements, and constructive arrangements can contribute to the implementation of the Declaration. All doctrines, policies, and practices based on or advocating the superiority of peoples or individuals on the basis of national origin or racial, religious, ethnic, or cultural differences, including the doctrines of discovery and terra nullius, are racist, scientifically false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. In conclusion, all of the above provisions will reinforce Indigenous peoples' well-being and self-determination now and in the future. For further reference, we have many resources on the legislation on our website, declaration.ca. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Coalition.
Thank you very much for your statement, Chief Littlechild.